Jake Miller's hands were covered in black grease when the alarm started screaming. He dropped the wrench he was holding and looked up at the night sky above his repair station. Something was falling fast, leaving a trail of fire across the darkness. The crash shook the entire building. Tools fell off the walls. The coffee mug on his desk tipped over and shattered on the floor. Jake grabbed his emergency kit and ran outside into the cold night air of Threshold 7. This frontier world didn't get many visitors, and the ones who crashed here usually brought trouble with them. The spacecraft was still smoking when he reached it. The hull was made of some kind of golden metal that seemed to glow even in the darkness. Strange symbols covered the sides, written in a language Jake had never seen before. He'd been fixing ships for 15 years out here on the edge of known space, but this was different. This was expensive. This was dangerous. Jake approached carefully, his boots crunching on the scattered debris. The ship's door had been blown open from the inside. Someone had escaped in a hurry. He pulled out his flashlight and pointed it into the wreckage. That's when he heard the sound. A soft whimpering like a scared animal. Jake climbed into the smoking cockpit, coughing as the acrid smell filled his lungs. In the corner, curled up against a broken control panel, was a tiny dragon. Jake stopped breathing for a second. Dragons were real. He'd heard the stories, seen them on news broadcasts from the core worlds, but never thought he'd actually see one. This one was small, no bigger than a house cat. Her scales shimmered like pearls in the flashlight beam, shifting colors from white to pink to soft blue. She had large eyes that looked up at him with pure terror. "Hey there, little one," Jake said softly, reaching out his hand slowly. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you." The baby dragon whimpered again and tried to press herself further into the corner. She was hurt. Jake could see scorch marks on her side where something had burned through her scales. Before he could get any closer, he heard the sound of boots on metal. Heavy boots. Military boots. Jake turned around and saw 5 armed men surrounding the wreckage. They wore mismatched armor and carried weapons that looked expensive and illegal. Mercenaries. The kind who did dirty work for people with deep pockets. "Step away from the creature," the leader said. He was a big man with a scarred face and cold eyes. His plasma rifle was pointed directly at Jake's chest. Jake's heart started pounding. "Look, I don't want any trouble. I'm just a mechanic." "Then act like one and hand over what doesn't belong to you," the mercenary said. His finger moved to the trigger. "That thing is worth more money than you'll see in 10 lifetimes. We're taking it." Jake looked back at the baby dragon. She was shaking now, her pearl-colored scales trembling. The mercenaries didn't care that she was alive, that she was scared, that she was just a child. To them she was cargo. Something to sell to the highest bidder. Jake thought about his daughter, Rachel. She'd been about 7 years old when the colony wars reached their settlement. He remembered holding her hand as the evacuation ships left without them. He remembered the explosion. He remembered everything. That was 12 years ago, and the pain still felt fresh every single day. He couldn't save Rachel. But maybe he could save this little one. "No," Jake said quietly. The mercenary leader laughed. "What did you say?" "I said no." Jake moved to stand between the armed men and the baby dragon. His legs were shaking, but he held his ground. "You're not taking her. You're going to die for a lizard?" the mercenary asked, genuinely confused. Jake didn't answer. He just stood there, blocking their view of the dragon. Behind him, he felt something warm press against his leg. The baby dragon had crawled over to him and was hiding behind his boots. The mercenary leader shrugged. "Your funeral, old man." Everything happened in slow motion after that. Jake saw the man's finger squeeze the trigger. He saw the blue light building up in the plasma rifle's chamber. He knew what was coming, knew he couldn't dodge it, knew this was probably the end. But he didn't move. He stayed right where he was, protecting the frightened creature behind him. The plasma bolt hit him square in the chest. The impact threw him backward. Pain exploded through his body, white-hot and terrible. Jake collapsed onto the cold ground, his vision already starting to go dark around the edges. He could hear the baby dragon crying somewhere nearby. As consciousness left him, Jake felt the air around him start to change. The temperature spiked suddenly. The darkness seemed to pull back. Reality itself felt like it was tearing apart. Then everything went black and Jake Miller knew nothing at all. 3 minutes passed. For Jake Miller, those 3 minutes were nothing but darkness and pain. But for the mercenary standing over his body, those 3 minutes became their last moments alive. The air started to shimmer like heat waves rising off desert sand. Then it got hot. Really hot. The kind of heat that makes metal glow red and stone crack. The mercenary leader looked around nervously, his weapon still smoking from the shot that had dropped Jake. "What's going on?" one of the men asked, backing away from the crashed ship. Before anyone could answer, the sky split open. There was no other way to describe it. Reality itself tore apart like someone had ripped a hole in the fabric of space. Through that hole came light so bright the mercenaries had to shield their eyes. And through that light came something massive. Empress Valora emerged from the portal in her true form. She was enormous, easily the size of a building. Her scales were pure gold, each one catching the light and throwing it back like 1,000 suns. Her eyes burned with power that had ended entire civilizations. When her claws touched the ground, the earth cracked beneath her weight. The mercenaries barely had time to scream. They raised their weapons, but it didn't matter. Valora didn't even look at them directly. She simply existed, and the sheer heat radiating from her body turned them to ash in an instant. Their weapons melted into puddles of metal. Their armor fused into the scorched earth. They were gone as if they had never existed at all. Lyra. The Empress's voice wasn't just sound. It was force. It shook the ground. It rattled what was left of the crashed ship. Birds flew away from trees a mile distant. The word carried the weight of a mother's terror and rage combined. The baby dragon crawled out from where she'd been hiding under Jake's unconscious body. Her pearl-colored scales were smudged with soot and blood, but she was alive. She looked up at her mother with huge, tear-filled eyes. "Mother." Princess Lyra cried out in the ancient dragon language. But then she looked back at Jake's still form and didn't move away from him. She pressed herself against his side protectively. Valora's massive form shimmered, and suddenly she was smaller, more human-sized though still clearly inhuman. She rushed forward and dropped to her knees beside her daughter, running her clawed hands over Lyra's small body, checking for injuries. "Are you hurt? Did they harm you?" "I came as soon as I felt your distress call," Valora said, her voice shaking in a way that would have shocked the millions who served in her empire. Empresses didn't shake. They didn't show fear. But mothers did. "The kind man saved me, Mother," Lyra said, still clinging to Jake. "The bad men wanted to take me away. They were going to hurt me. But this human stepped in front. He took the fire meant for me." Valora's eyes moved to Jake for the first time. Really looked at him. He was nobody special, she could see that immediately. Rough clothes stained with grease. Calloused hands from manual labor. The kind of human who worked on the frontier because they had nowhere else to go. His chest was burned black where the plasma bolt had hit him. By all rights he should be dead. But he wasn't dead. Not yet. His chest was still moving slightly. Barely breathing but breathing. Valora felt something she hadn't experienced in her 3,000 years of life. Confusion. Deep, genuine confusion. She ruled over 1/3 of the known galaxy. She commanded legions. She had destroyed worlds that defied her. And in all that time, in all those countless encounters with lesser species, she had never seen anything like this. A human had sacrificed himself for a dragon. Not for money. Not for power. Not because he was ordered to. He had simply seen a child in danger and decided her life was worth more than his own. "This is impossible," Valora whispered. "Humans don't do this. They're selfish. They're weak. They only help when there's something to gain." "But he did, Mother," Lyra insisted. "He saved me and asked for nothing." Valora stood up slowly, her mind racing. By the ancient laws of her people, laws that went back before humans even discovered fire, a life debt had been created. When someone saved a dragon's life, that dragon owed them a debt that had to be repaid. It was sacred. It was absolute. It was law. But there was a problem. In the entire recorded history of the Dragon Empire, spanning thousands of years, no dragon had ever owed a life debt to a human. The idea was almost offensive. Dragons were superior beings. Humans were barely above animals in most dragons' estimation. How could the superior owe the inferior? Yet here was the proof, dying on the ground in front of her. This human had done the impossible. "Take him to the flagship," Valora commanded. Soldiers materialized from the portal behind her, elite guards in armor that could withstand star core temperatures. "Use our best healers. Use the regeneration tanks. I don't care what it costs. Save his life." The guards moved quickly, lifting Jake's body with careful precision. Within seconds they had him through the portal and onto the medical bay of the Imperial flagship. Technology that was centuries beyond human understanding went to work on his damaged body. Valora held Lyra close as they followed through the portal. Hours passed while the healers worked. Valora stood outside the medical chamber, watching through the crystal walls as machines rebuilt what the plasma bolt had destroyed. She should have been attending to affairs of state, hunting down whoever had orchestrated her daughter's kidnapping, preparing for war. Instead, she watched a human mechanic fight for his life and wondered what kind of being would die for a stranger. Finally, Jake's eyes opened. The healers had done their work. His chest was whole again, not even a scar remaining. He was alive, stronger than before actually, the regeneration process having healed old injuries he'd carried for years. They moved him to a recovery chamber. When he was strong enough to sit up, Valora entered alone. She had changed her appearance to something less intimidating, taking a form that looked almost human except for the golden scales that traced patterns across her skin and the eyes that still glowed with inner fire. Jake stared at her, clearly trying to process everything. The last thing he remembered was dying. Now he was in a room made of crystal and gold, feeling better than he had in decades, facing a being he recognized from 1,000 news reports. "You're the Empress," he said quietly. "I am," Valora confirmed. She sat down across from him, studying his face. "You saved my daughter. Is she okay?" Jake asked immediately. Not, "Where am I?" or "What happened?" His first thought was for Lyra. "She's safe because of you," Valora said. "You took a death blow meant for her." "Why?" Jake was quiet for a moment. "She needed help." Jake stared at Empress Valora, this being who could destroy planets with a thought, who ruled over billions of lives across hundreds of worlds. She was offering him everything anyone could ever want. Wealth beyond imagination. Power that most people only dreamed about. A chance to never worry about money or safety again. And he was about to turn it all down. "I don't want anything," Jake said simply. "I just want to go home to my repair station." Valora's golden eyes went wide. In 3,000 years of life, through countless wars and negotiations, through dealing with every species in the known galaxy, nobody had ever refused her gifts. Nobody. When a dragon empress offered you the universe, you took it and thanked her for her generosity. "You refuse reward?" she asked, her voice carrying genuine disbelief. "You understand what I'm offering, yes? I could make you richer than most planetary governors. I could give you a mansion on the paradise world of your choice. I could extend your lifespan by centuries with our technology. You would never want for anything again." Jake shook his head slowly. "I didn't save your daughter because I wanted something from you. I did it because it was the right thing to do." She was scared and in danger. That's all that mattered. Valora stood up and began pacing around the crystal chamber. This didn't make sense. In dragon culture, every action had a purpose, a calculated outcome. You didn't risk your life without expecting something in return. Honor, glory, wealth, power, something. That was how the universe worked. That was how intelligent beings operated. "But you gained nothing," Valora said, turning to face him. "You nearly died. You were willing to die. For what? For a stranger?" "For a kid who needed help," Jake corrected her. "That's enough reason right there." Valora stopped pacing. She studied Jake's face carefully, looking for the lie, the hidden motive, the angle he was working. There had to be something. But all she saw in his eyes was simple honesty. He genuinely meant what he said. This human had risked everything for her daughter and expected nothing in return. Fascinating, Valora murmured to herself. She had studied human culture before, of course. Every empress needed to understand the species under her rule. But the textbooks and reports had gotten it wrong. They said humans were selfish, that they only helped family members or when there was clear benefit. Yet here stood proof that humans could be something more. Before Valora could say anything else, the chamber doors burst open. Princess Lyra ran in, her small dragon form moving surprisingly fast. She scrambled up Jake's leg and perched on his shoulder, wrapping her tail around his neck like a scarf. "Jake is my guardian," Lyra announced loudly, her child's voice filled with absolute certainty. "He protected me when the bad men came. That makes him mine. He has to stay with me." Jake gently patted her head. "Hey there, little one. I'm glad you're okay." Valora's expression changed. In dragon culture, when a young dragon claimed someone as their guardian, it was a sacred bond. It meant that person was now part of the dragon's horde, their most precious possessions. Breaking that bond once declared was considered deeply dishonorable. "Lyra, sweetheart, Jake wants to go home," Valora said carefully. "Then home comes with us," Lyra declared, snuggling against Jake's neck. "Jake stays. This is decided." Jake looked helplessly at Valora, who looked equally helpless back at him. An empress who commanded armies, and she couldn't convince her daughter to let go of the human who'd saved her life. The news spread fast. Within hours, every dragon lord in the empire knew that a human was now closely connected to the imperial family. For most dragons this was merely strange news. But for some, it was an opportunity. Lord Talon, who ruled the Eastern Territories and had always hungered for more power, saw his chance. He gathered his supporters in a secret meeting on his fortress world. These were dragons who believed Valora had grown too soft, too willing to negotiate with lesser species instead of simply conquering them. She's gone too far this time, Talon told his allies. A human in the Imperial household? It's shameful. It shows weakness. If we can remove this human, we prove that the Empress can't even protect those she claims to value. Her support will crumble. The first assassination attempt came 2 days later. A drone strike targeted Jake's location while he was being given a tour of the flagship. Only Valora's personal shields, which she'd secretly placed around him, saved his life. The explosion turned half a corridor into slag, but Jake walked away without a scratch. The second attempt was poison in his food. It failed because dragons didn't understand human biology well enough, and the poison they used was actually harmless to humans. The third attempt was more direct. An assassin infiltrated the flagship disguised as a maintenance worker and attacked Jake with a plasma blade. This time, Jake fought back using some old military training from his youth, managing to hold the attacker off until guards arrived. But it was close. Too close. Valora was furious. Someone was actively trying to kill the being her daughter had claimed as guardian. This wasn't just an attack on Jake. It was an attack on Lyra's choice, on Valora's honor, on the Imperial family itself. She called an emergency session of the Grand Council, the gathering of the most powerful dragons in the Empire. Hundreds of dragon lords filled the massive throne room, their true forms making the space feel crowded despite its enormous size. Valora stood before them all and made an announcement that would be talked about for centuries. I hereby declare Jake Miller to be the official Horde Guardian of Princess Lyra and place him under direct Imperial protection. Her voice rang out across the chamber. Any attack on him is an attack on my daughter. Any threat to him is a threat to the Imperial line. Anyone who harms him will face me personally. The chamber erupted in shocked whispers. This was unprecedented. Unthinkable. A human being given a formal title and placed under the highest level of protection in the Empire? Some dragons looked outraged. Others looked confused. But everyone understood what this meant. It was a challenge. Valora was daring her enemies to make a move. She was drawing a line and forcing everyone to choose a side. Those who accepted this would support her. Those who opposed it would reveal themselves as enemies. In his fortress world, Lord Talon received the news and smiled. The Empress had just done exactly what he wanted. She tied her reputation and authority to a fragile human. All he had to do now was break that human, and the Empress's power would break with him. Perfect, Talon said to his assembled forces. She's handed us the weapon we need to destroy her. Now we just need to use it. War was coming. And Jake Miller, a simple mechanic who just wanted to fix ships and live quietly, was about to become the center of a conflict that would shake the entire Dragon Empire. Jake stood in the war room aboard the Imperial flagship, staring at the holographic display floating in front of him. It showed a map of the Empire with red markers indicating where the attacks were coming from. There were dozens of them, scattered across multiple star systems. Someone with serious resources was coordinating this. They'll keep coming, Jake said quietly. Whoever's behind this won't stop until I'm dead or you back down. Valora stood beside him, her golden scales catching the light from the hologram. Her jaw was set in determination, and her eyes burned with barely controlled rage. Then I will destroy them all. I'll hunt down every assassin, every conspirator, every dragon who dares threaten what belongs to my family. I'll turn their worlds to glass. Jake had seen that look before, back during the colony wars. It was the look of someone about to do something terrible because they felt they had no other choice. He understood it. Part of him even agreed with it. But he'd learned something during those dark years. Or, Jake hesitated, knowing what he was about to suggest would sound crazy. We could be smarter about this. Valora turned to look at him, one eyebrow raised. Smarter? Yeah. Look, I know I'm just a human and you've been doing this Empress thing for way longer than I've been alive, but hear me out. Jake pointed at the hologram. You go after these people directly, you start a civil war. Even if you win, thousands die, maybe millions. Planets get destroyed. Your empire tears itself apart. What's your alternative? Valora asked, genuinely curious now. Jake took a breath. Back in my military days we had a saying, let your enemy think they're winning right up until they've already lost. You want to know who's behind this? Stop fighting back so hard. Make them think they're close to succeeding. Let them get confident and make a mistake. Valora's eyes narrowed. You want me to appear weak? To let them think they're defeating me? That's dishonorable. Dragons don't hide. We don't deceive. We face our enemies directly. And that's exactly what they're counting on, Jake said. They know you. They know you'll respond with force. They're ready for that. They're not ready for you to think like a human. For a long moment, Valora said nothing. Jake could see her wrestling with the idea. Everything in her culture, everything she'd been taught for 3,000 years, told her this was wrong. But she was also smart enough to see the logic. Explain your plan, she finally said. Over the next hour, Jake laid it out. They would announce a diplomatic summit on a neutral world. Jake would attend with minimal security, supposedly because Valora wanted to show she wasn't afraid. In reality, it would be bait. The conspirators wouldn't be able to resist such an easy target. When they made their move, Valora's forces would be ready to capture them alive and gather proof of who was really behind the attacks. It took 3 weeks to set up. During that time, Valora had to pretend she was overwhelmed, that the constant attacks were wearing her down. She had to reduce Jake's visible security, making it look like she couldn't afford to protect him properly anymore. It went against every instinct she had, but she trusted Jake's plan. The summit was held on a trading station orbiting a gas giant. Delegates from dozens of species attended, discussing trade agreements and border disputes. Jake walked through the crowds with only 2 guards, looking vulnerable. He could feel eyes on him, watching, waiting. Lord Talon made his move on the 3rd day. His assassins struck during a crowded reception, using the chaos to get close. But the moment they revealed their weapons, Valora's hidden forces dropped their disguises. Within seconds, the assassins were captured, their communication devices seized, all their encrypted messages recovered. The evidence was damning. Lord Talon's personal authorization on every attack order. Financial records showing payments to mercenaries. Even video of Talon himself ordering Jake's death. It was perfect, undeniable proof of treason. Valora had Talon arrested in front of the entire Grand Council. She presented the evidence for all to see. Talon's allies abandoned him immediately, not wanting to be associated with proven treason. It should have been over. But Talon had one final move. Using an ancient law that even Valora couldn't refuse, he challenged her to ritual combat for the throne. It was a law from the old days designed to prevent tyrants from ruling forever. Any dragon lord could challenge the ruler if they believed that ruler had become unfit. And once challenged, the ruler had to accept or forfeit the crown. The arena was built on a barren moon within a week. Dragons from across the empire gathered to witness what would happen. Some came to support Valora. Others came hoping to see her fall. The arena itself was massive, carved from solid rock, big enough for dragons in their true forms to battle. Jake stood in the viewing area reserved for the imperial family, feeling completely out of place among the dragons around him. Little Lyra clung to his hand, scared for her mother. Lord Talon entered first, transforming into his true dragon form. He was enormous, covered in dark red scales that looked like dried blood. He had scars across his body from 100 battles. This was a dragon who had spent centuries perfecting the art of combat. He moved with deadly grace, every step calculated. Valora entered from the other side, her golden scales brilliant even in the dim light of the arena. She was beautiful and terrifying, but Jake could see something in how she moved. She was a ruler, a strategist, a leader. But she wasn't a warrior, not like Talon. She'd spent her centuries building an empire, negotiating treaties, managing resources. She could fight, but Talon had made fighting his life's purpose. The battle began with a roar that shook the moon's surface. Talon struck first, moving faster than something that large should be able to move. His claws raked across Valora's side, drawing blood that glowed like molten gold. Valora countered with fire, but Talon dodged easily, laughing. "You've grown soft, Empress." Talon's voice boomed across the arena. Too much time sitting on a throne, not enough time in real battle. Jake watched carefully, his old military training kicking in. He'd spent years studying tactics, learning how soldiers moved, finding patterns in chaos. And he saw it. Talon was good, maybe the best fighter alive, but he had a tell. Every time he prepared for a big strike, he shifted his weight to his back left leg first. It was barely noticeable, just a fraction of a second, but it was there. "Empress." Jake shouted as loud as he could. "Watch his back left. He telegraphs before heavy strikes." The Dragon Council erupted in outrage. Hundreds of angry voices demanded Jake be silenced. This was sacred ritual combat. Outsiders weren't supposed to interfere. But the ancient law said nothing about advice from the sidelines. There was no actual rule being broken. Valora heard him. The next time Talon shifted his weight, she was ready. She dodged his strike and countered with a devastating blow to his exposed side. Talon roared in surprise and pain. Left side. Jake called out. He drops his guard when he uses fire. Again Valora adapted. Again she landed a hit that Talon didn't see coming. Jake kept calling out observations, pointing out patterns in Talon's fighting style that the dragon himself probably didn't even know he had. And Valora, brilliant and adaptable as she was, turned Jake's human tactical thinking into devastating attacks. The tide of battle shifted. Talon, the legendary warrior, found himself being beaten by an opponent he'd thought would be easy to defeat. And he was being beaten not through superior strength, but through strategy. Through thinking differently. Through seeing the fight the way a human would see it. The final clash echoed across the arena. Valora's golden claws closed around Lord Talon's throat, pinning him to the ground. His dark red scales were cracked and bleeding. He struggled, but he was beaten. Everyone watching knew it. The legendary warrior had been defeated. Finish it, Talon gasped, his voice hoarse. Kill me. That's how this ends. Valora's claws tightened slightly. Jake could see the rage in her eyes. This dragon had tried to murder someone under her protection. He'd threatened her daughter. He'd attempted to tear apart everything she'd built. Every tradition, every law of dragon culture said she should end him right now. But then Valora looked up at the viewing area where Jake stood with Princess Lyra. She saw Jake watching her carefully, not telling her what to do, just being there. And she thought about everything this human had taught her over the past weeks. About thinking differently. About choosing wisdom over simple strength. Valora's claws released. She stepped back, leaving Talon alive on the arena floor. No, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. I could kill you. Maybe I should kill you. But that's the old way. The way that solves everything with death and destruction. Today I choose differently. The entire Dragon Council sat in stunned silence. This wasn't how these battles ended. Ever. Lord Talon, you are stripped of all titles, all lands, all authority, Valora announced. You are banished from the Empire. You will leave with only the ship you came in and never return. If you do, then you will face execution. But I will not kill a beaten enemy. I will not give you the warrior's death you think you've earned. Instead, you get to live with your failure. Talon stared up at her in disbelief. For a dragon warrior, this was somehow worse than death. It was humiliation. It was proof that he'd lost so completely that he wasn't even worth killing. Valora transformed back to her smaller form and walked out of the arena. The Dragon Council remained silent, trying to process what they'd just witnessed. Their Empress had won through strategy and intelligence, using insights from a human. And then she'd shown mercy, something dragons rarely did. It would be talked about for centuries. The day everything changed. After the ceremony ended, after Lord Talon's ship had left the Empire never to return, Valora found Jake sitting alone on an observation deck, looking out at the stars. That was quite something you did out there, Jake said as she sat beside him. I learned it from you, Valora replied. Thinking differently. Seeing options that tradition says shouldn't exist. They sat quietly for a moment. Then Valora turned to face him fully. The debt still stands. You saved my daughter's life. By my law, by my honor, I owe you a reward. And this time I'm not taking no for an answer. Name your price, Jake Miller. Anything in my empire can be yours. Jake thought about it. He thought about all the things he could ask for. Money, power, a new life. But he knew what he really wanted. I want my workshop back, he said. But not just for me. I want you to declare it neutral ground. Protected space where anyone from any species can come for help without fear. A place where it doesn't matter if you're human or dragon or anything else. If you need help, you get it. Valora smiled slowly. Just when I think I understand you, you surprise me again. Yes, I'll do that. But I'm going to do more. The next day, Valora issued an imperial decree that shocked the galaxy. She created something called the Guardian Protocol. It stated that any being, regardless of species, who showed selfless courage in protecting others would be granted imperial honor and protection. It meant that acts of genuine heroism would be recognized and rewarded, even if done by species that dragons had previously considered beneath notice. It was radical. It was revolutionary. It turned centuries of tradition upside down. But Valora had the political capital now to make it work. She'd proven that thinking differently could win battles. Now she was proving it could change an entire civilization. Jake returned to Threshold 7 a week later. His small repair station looked exactly the same, but everything was different. There was now an imperial seal on the front declaring it protected neutral territory. Ships from dozens of species started arriving, knowing they could get help here regardless of who they were or what they could pay. The workshop became famous. It became a place where a refugee could get their escape pod fixed for free. Where a merchant whose ship broke down could get repairs at fair prices. Where different species who normally didn't trust each other could sit in Jake's tiny waiting room and share stories over terrible coffee. Princess Lyra visited every few weeks, sometimes with her mother, sometimes with friends she'd made from other species. She loved watching Jake work, learning about engines and circuits. She'd practice her fire breathing carefully in the yard behind the workshop, making sure not to melt anything important. One afternoon, about 3 months after Jake had returned, he was underneath a freighter replacing a burnt-out power coupling. Lyra was perched on a toolbox nearby, telling him about her lessons in Imperial history. The radio in the corner was playing old Earth music. Then the emergency channel crackled to life. A distress signal. A transport ship with families aboard had suffered catastrophic engine failure. They were drifting toward a gas giant's atmosphere. They had maybe an hour before they'd be crushed by pressure. Jake rolled out from under the freighter, grease on his face, and grabbed his emergency kit without hesitation. "Stay here, little one," he told Lyra. "I'll be back soon." "Be careful, Jake," Lyra said, worry in her young voice. Jake smiled at her. "Always am." He fired up his old rescue ship and headed out into the darkness. Because that's what Guardians do. They show up when someone needs help. They step in when others are in danger. They don't ask for thanks or rewards or recognition. They just do what's right because it needs to be done. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, doing what's right changes the entire galaxy. The stars shone overhead as Jake's ship disappeared into the distance, heading toward people who needed help. Back at the workshop, Princess Lyra watched him go and smiled. Her guardian was exactly who the universe needed him to be. Just a simple mechanic who believed that everyone, no matter who they were, deserved someone willing to stand up for them. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything.